نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Respectful honorable mothers and sisters and brothers, being weekend, inshallah the majlis will be in English. And just changing the topic a little from what we had been mentioning with regards the Islah of the Qalb, Islah of the Nafs. Jawan admi hai na? लगाने की जरूरत नहीं है. With regards to the need for cleansing the heart, the examples I've given with regards to the heart being the king, inshallah we'll come back to this topic. Just a couple of matters and advice with regards to the seeking of the night of Qadr, and as well as what ibadah should be done and what should be recited. I should mention to you a couple of things which I mentioned earlier on in the latest talk for those who were not with. And that is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with these last 10 days and the last 10 nights, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the opportunity that as much as possible, look, you kids, if you want to listen, listen. If not, go in the house. And I'm not saying that in a good way that you can go and play. I'm saying in the sense that you're disturbing me here, that's why. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with these 10 nights. And these are those nights in which a person, if he or she tries, they can reach great closeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and acquire a lot with regards to ibadat. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these nights has obviously blessed us with the night of Qadr, and that whoever does the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the night of Qadr, they will get the reward of 1,000 months of ibadat, which is equal to 83 years and 4 months, which is longer than a person's own lifespan. And this is by just making ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the night of Qadr. With regards to the night of Qadr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept it vague for us, that we don't know precisely which night it falls on. And there is great wisdom behind this as well, being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows our nature and He knows our weakness, He knows our laziness as well. And that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had fixed for us, if Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam had clearly mentioned to us which night from these last 10 is a night of Qadr, then majority of us would have probably done no ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the month of Ramadan, and would just wait and rely for this night of Qadr so that we can do some ibadat in this night of Qadr and make up for the entire month that we have done no ibadat at all. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept it vague. So at least a person in his pursuit for the night of Qadr will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for minimum at least 5 nights in his search for it, being the 5 odd nights during the last 10. In this way, if he does ibadat on all these days, then he will definitely get the night of Qadr. Now one thing is that a person only does the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the odd nights. In that there is also a chance, a possibility, that a person may miss this night, or that a person may not be able to do ibadat according to how they had desired to. In a sense that on the first of the odd night, the 21st for example, the person has done or did a lot of ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that night. So much ibadat that the person became the person exerted themselves and became quite tired as well. Now when we come on to the 23rd, there is a possibility the person may not have the same valor in them or the same amount of desire to repeat what they did on the 21st. So on 21st they've done as much as they could. Because unfortunately, we do not have the habit of doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we had the habit of doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it would be a different case. We'd be able to exert ourselves as much as possible any time that there was a need. But we do not have that habit. And because we do not have that habit, whenever we do just a little extra, we feel it. Physically we feel it and mentally we feel it. And because we don't have on normal days itself, we do not have the habit of reading the Kitab of Allah, the Quran of Allah. Because we don't read the Quran on normal days, then in the month of Ramadan, when we read the Quran, and in the month of Ramadan, we increase the amount of Quran as well. So we find that very burdensome, and we find that very difficult. And we find it very difficult to maintain that as well. Because from the onset, we don't have this habit of doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the training matters of the month of Ramadan is, or the benefits of the month of Ramadan is, that it is in this month that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala avails for us the opportunity to get into the habit of doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But unfortunately, the habit that we create in this month, as soon as the month of Ramadan comes to an end, we totally stop everything. It isn't a case of that we maintain, and by maintaining there is no way that a person is going to maintain the same level as one does in the month of Ramadan. Especially those who have increased their levels, for them to maintain that throughout is going to become difficult. But we do not even maintain half of that, or at times even a quarter of that. But after the month of Ramadan, we come back down to the bare minimum. And the bare minimum for others will differ. For some, the bare minimum will be at least still the faraiz, those things which are farz and wajib, and at least this is still good. And there will be those for whom the bare minimum is what? Nothing at all. For them it is nothing at all. They just came into the masajid during the month of Ramadan. They just started doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the month of Ramadan. And then as soon as the month of Ramadan comes to an end, all that also stops and ceases. This form of ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward us. Whatever we have done, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. Whatever we do in the month of Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward us for it surely. But it isn't something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes from us that we do His ibadat. For 1 month alone we do His ibadat. Or from that 1 month we do His ibadat just for 10 days. Or from the whole month we just do the ibadat of Allah for 1 night. And then after that we forget the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or after the month of Ramadan we stop doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like such ibadat. He'll still reward us. Not that He won't reward us. He'll still reward us for what He did. Because Allah is Allah after all. He will still reward us for what we have done. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not like us. He will not like our deeds. That we remember Him only when there are times to remember Him. With regards to auspiciousness of days and nights. And then once that comes to an end, then we no longer remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala greatly dislikes. So we won't be able to maintain the same level. We won't be able to maintain the same level. But at the same time, at least maintain some ibadat. At least maintain some ibadat after the month of Ramadan. So as I was mentioning to you, we do not have that habit of doing the ibadat of Allah. The person who doesn't even open the Quran throughout the year, now for that person to read one para, even becomes so difficult. And if that person decides at least I want to do 1 khatam, which is minimum, 1 khatam, which is actually child's play. And for that one khatam throughout the month of Ramadan, they have to read one para a day. And that too, if there are 30 days. If not, they'll have to read a bit extra in there. Now for that person, that 1 para a day itself is like just climbing a mountain. It is so difficult just to read that 1 para a day. And the reason why it's so difficult is, one, the reason that the habit of reading the Quran, and the other is they are not so eloquent in reading the Quran. And they're not so eloquent of reading the Quran, not because they didn't learn how to read the Quran. They learned how to read the Quran, but they didn't have the practice of reading the Quran. Many of us who are weak in reading the Quran, we are weak in reading the Quran not because we didn't learn the Quran, but because we've lost the practice of reading the Quran. And which is the same with everything else. If we learn something and over time we stop practicing it, obviously we're going to become rusty. We're going to find it difficult to maintain that. Somebody who's passed his test, learn how to drive the car, but now for years doesn't drive the car at all. Or even for one whole year doesn't drive the car. The first time they sit in there, the great possibility is that as soon as they start the car, they might just stall the car until they get back used to using their pedals in that. The person who drives an automatic, after some time drives a manual, finds the same difficulty as well. Why? Because we've lost the practice there. Our case is the same. That we don't read the Quran on a regular basis, because of which we've lost practice of reading the Quran. And now when it comes to reading the Quran in the month of Ramadan, that one para, one juz becomes so difficult. Why? Because in that one page we're stalling so many times. So one page alone we're stalling so many times, we're repeating the words, we're stopping, we're not sure how to read it, we're going back and we're reading again. And that one page becomes so difficult for us because there isn't that practice of reading the Quran. Whereas if we had been reading the Quran regularly, and by regularly, even if it had been just one para, or even less, throughout the year, then the Quran would be on our tongue. And like anything else, the more we hear something, the more we read something, it becomes easier for us to read. The Quran as well. One is that a person becomes a Hafiz of Quran, and a person is a Hafiz of Quran, it will be easy for that person to read the Quran. But at the same time, a person who reads the Quran on a regular basis, for them as well, the Quran comes onto the tongue, and reciting the Quran becomes easier for them. So then when the month of Ramadan comes, it isn't so difficult for them to increase the amount of recitation of the Quran. But that is when there is already a habit of reading the Quran. Dear friends, make it a habit of daily reading the Quran. Those who have made whatever amount of khatam throughout the month of Ramadan, do not let it stop there. With Ramadan khatam, do not make that the khatam of your Quran. We do the khatam of the Quran in the end of Ramadan, and that's it. Our connection with the Quran, our reading of the Quran comes to khatam as well. And throughout the year, that's it. Khatam, Quran khatam ho gaya. We take literally, Quran khatam ho gaya. That means no Quran anymore. Just so we find, in some places, some masajid, they'll have khatam of the Quran early in Ramadan. Some people in the first 10 days, some in the first 15 days. People have these. And they don't mind undertaking that extra difficulty in getting through those 10 days or 15 days. Why? Because then it's going to become easy for them. When it becomes easy for them, what they think is that because we finished the Quran, that means there's no Tarawih anymore. They want to finish the Quran, so that means there's no Tarawih after that. And what is the benefit in finishing it so soon? Where is the person going to go? There are those people who their occupation is such that they cannot spend so much time for Tarawih. And they have the desire to want to at least read the Quran, finish the Quran in Tarawih. It's different that you are accommodating for such people, but these we talk about normal people. And we want to just finish the Quran quickly. And what happens is, as soon as that Quran comes to an end, we find people finish the Tarawih as well. And we see it ourselves. Those masajid where the Quran finishes on the 27th, 28th, the masjid are half empty. Masjid are half empty. 29 again, they're half empty again. Why? Because Khatam, Quran Khatam, and that's enough for us. This is how we become. So we literally take it, the Quran Khatam ho gaya, and that's it, that's the end of it. Whereas there's no such thing as us finishing the Quran. For us, the recitation continues. That is just Khatam of the Quran in Tarawih Salah. For us, the Quran is something, a book of life. That all time we're going to be reading the Kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with the ending of the month of Ramadan, do not cease and do not end your recitation of the Quran. Even if you can't one para a day, which you might be doing in the month of Ramadan, because in the month of Ramadan people make themselves free. They spend more time in the masajid. So they've got time. Normal days we cannot have so much time. Then at least that amount that a person knows that they can read continuously throughout the year, throughout their life. Even if it is just one page, be it one page, but that one page is continuous throughout the year. And you'll find and experience the great benefit of that. That if you've done that throughout the year, then when the next Ramadan comes, you'll increase from one para to definitely 2 para. You'll increase. If you didn't only have a para, you'll increase to 1 para, or whatever it is that person needs. Because of that regular practice of reading the Quran. And not only that, but that regular attachment with the Quran will also be created. So now there will be that extra desire and affection and love, connection with reciting the Quran because of the habit of reading the Quran. And now the one who hasn't read throughout the year, now in the month of Ramadan to start reading, again it feels burdensome. We find it very difficult to do because we haven't been in the habit of reading the Quran. So what is here, friends? Take the time out and fix the time, which is something that is very, very important. Otherwise, our ibadat is like the incident I mentioned to you yesterday of that in Yaupur village, where there was no justice. I won't repeat that again. We laughed enough at it yesterday and spent enough time on it. Our ibadat is that, where there is absolutely no pattern or no order in the way we do our ibadat. Because as we get fursat, as we get time, as we get opportunity, we might do some ibadat. And because of that, there is no regularity in the ibadat that we do. For everything that we do, we need to set a time out for it. And if there is time set for it, you will find that ibadat will be regular. For matters of dunya, we set things out. For then we have time set. And no matter how busy we are, we've all got the time to read our emails. We've got time for that. We've got time to see what the latest news is. We've got time to browse the internet before we go to work. Or in between work. We've got that fixed time the person takes out in order to deal with all these other social matters. When that is the case, then why not take out that amount of time to just read the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just the way technology has made things easy for us, that people say we're so busy nowadays that we don't get time to actually sit and read our emails, so we need our emails on the go. So even on the go we can read our emails. So now technology has made it easy that now we on the same mobiles we've got our emails, we can get the Quran on there as well. So on the go we can be reading the Quran as well. If somebody is now so tight with time, so tight, there's got absolutely no time whatsoever, even they can have that amount of time that they can at least read one page on the go on their mobile phone. And this I'm talking about somebody who's working probably in the 24 hours or something in the emergency services. Otherwise, there is enough time for us for that as well. But that is if we want to do it. If we want to do it, we'll take the time out. If we want to do it, we'll make a time specifically for it. And if you don't want to, then we won't. If a person becomes ill, and if the doctor has said to the person that, look, due to your illness, during the day you need to take, even if it is just 15 minutes, take 15 minutes out and have a nap. You need to have that. If you don't, it's going to affect your health. Then the person will ensure and make sure that throughout the day they'll take that 15 minutes out to have that nap. Why? Because they know if they don't, it will affect their health. For their life and their health, they will take that time out for that. If the doctor is told to them, look, you need to take this amount of medication, and the amount of medication is as long as a shopping list. But to take that, they need to take 5 minutes out to take it. Time before, after the meal, and have a short meal in between. They'll take the time out in order to take that medication. And if the doctor says that your health is such that you need to take out even 10 minutes just for a walk around the block, some physical exercise, they'll take the 10 minutes out to do that exercise. So for these matters, for our health and that, will take time out. What about taking time out for the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on which our ruhani depends upon, on which our imani life depends upon, our dini life depends upon. But unfortunately for that we do not have the time. Ensure that we take out time to read the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those who are bad, if they are taking out time to do their wazaif and not doing the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is wrong. Because the greatest zikr is the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we have time to do the wazaif that our mashayikh have mentioned to us, then we should have even time to read the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because what we get in reciting the words of Allah, in reciting the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're not going to get that in reading any other du'as in wazaif. Very, very important to fix a certain amount and have regularity upon that amount throughout the year. And as I was mentioning to you, we find it difficult to do the ibadat of Allah because there isn't the habit. The month of Ramadan comes, the Taraweeh is a tall order. The reason the Taraweeh is a tall order is because we don't even have the practice of 4 rakats farz So now an extra 20 rakats in the sunnahs before and after becomes a tall order. Massive. Very difficult for us. Because we're not even in the habit of reading. The first tarawih, after that we need to go home and get the wives to give us a massage. We need to put eye drops and heat and all these things. Deep heat and all sorts of things. Wintergreen and all that. After the first tarawih we knackered. We knocked out after the first tarawih. Our joints are aching. Joints are aching and pain. And already the youngsters are thinking, tomorrow I'll make sure I'm going to sit on the chair. We like to be chairman. We have these people who are chairman. I'm going to make a chairman. One is those people who are now old. Or those people who are ill. Who desperately need the chair. It is different, they can have the chair. But if you were to ask them, would you prefer sitting on the chair or would you prefer standing and reading all your salah? They will say, we wish we could stand and perform all the salah. So those who are sat, they wish they could stand and read. And those who are standing wish that if any excuse for them to be able to sit and read the salah. This is how we have become. So after the first night itself, our body aches and pains. Reason being is because we haven't had the practice of doing the ibadat of Allah. A person who has to read salah the entire year now, for them to perform 20 rakats becomes very difficult. And then you find when we in the qada as well, they're jumping up and down. They're jumping up and down. This is a reflection of what will happen in the day of resurrection, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions. Those who do not perform salah, who haven't had the salah, yarkaun, they'll be told to do ruku, but they will not be able to do ruku. They won't be able to do sajda. Why? Because their limbs will not allow them to do ruku and sajda to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because they didn't have the practice. That's the way. You want to do exercise, what we told, do warm up beforehand. Warm up beforehand so your limbs and your joints are flexible so you can do that. Lift something up, before you lift it up, warm up, loosen yourself up so that you can lift the heavy weight. If you're all tight and stiff, you're going to lift the heavy weight, you're going to injure yourself. Because we're not in that practice of doing something like that. In the same way, our salah is as well such. Because we're not regular with our salah, we find the postures of salah so difficult as well. How many musallis you see? For them to sit according to the sunnat method in the tashahhud position, in the qada position, is difficult. They can't keep their feet bent. They can't keep their feet in the posture of sunnat. Because they haven't had that habit. And that's the posture of sunnah, of the left leg, foot being flat, the right raised with the toes facing towards the qibla. This is a posture that if you've been doing it from a young age, you'll be able to do it later on as well. And if you try now to implement it at the older age, you'll find it difficult to do. It becomes difficult for a person to do. So there are so many musallis who can't even sit in qada. It's very difficult for them from ruku to go into sajda as well. And the reason being, one is that the person has become ill now or become old, that is different. But majority of the time it is just because there's no flexibility in our joints. And the reason there's no flexibility there because we haven't had the habit of reading salah. That's why you hear all the cracks, knee joints and everything cracking in that. Why? Because different if you've got a wooden leg or something, or a steel plate inside. But there are those who just don't have the habit. And because there's no habit, everything is going to crack at that time. If you've got the habit, our limbs and organs will be flexible to be able to do all the postures of salah. And when that is the case, we will find salah easy, we won't find it burdensome. And we'll also enjoy performing salah if we are able to do salah. If we are in sajda and now our backs are paining and can't wait for the imam to get up from sajda, we're not going to enjoy that sajda. Whereas that position of sajda, that is mirajul mu'minin. That is the closest that a person becomes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the night of Miraj went very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where Sayyidina Jibreel Amin could not go further than that, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam reached so close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it was then that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam had asked from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his ummah. That was a personal journey of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To see the love that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam had for his ummah, this was a personal invitation to Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That you come to me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam to himself. That was his occasion. Just so you'll have that if there is a group leader, Like for example, we had the torch relay. In torch relay, people, they volunteered, people sort of gave names and suggested, look, we have this society or this cancer society or this charity and that. And the leader or the founder of the charity, this person is worthy of that. And in this way, that person is nominated. So that there is a personal invitation, a personal achievement for that individual. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invited Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam as being the most closest to him, the Imam of all the Anbiya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, brought him to him. It was Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam's personal closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was his occasion. But even on that occasion, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not want to meet Allah and not take something back for this ummah. Even then Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted the ummah to be part of this closeness that he had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now Allah, I have come so close to you. When I have come so close to you, what about my ummah? Now when this ummah can't get so close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that physical form, so on that then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam the salat. So by granting Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam the salat is the mirajul mu'min. That it is in this salat that a person can get just as close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam did on the night of Miraj. But our salat, we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are close to everything else but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are totally away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are close to everything else but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the condition of our salat. Whereas that is the time. And from the entire salat, the posture of sajda, that is the posture which is closest, the servant becomes most closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Chum lete asman ko zameen se akhtar. That it is that time whilst we are in sajda that we are touching the heavens. That our heads are directly in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is how close we are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The closest any person can be is that in sajda. The lutf and enjoyment in all the postures is not the same as that of sajda. For that reason, when I do sajda, when I go into sajda, I feel that Allah is doing pyar with my heart. जब मैं सजदा में होता हूँ तो Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala मुझसे प्यार करते हैं. I can feel the pyar, the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when I go into sajda, which he mentioned, do not even question, ask me with regards to the lutf of sajda. How many of us experience this? Now we see if our limbs are aching and paining, we go into sajda, we can't wait when the Imam says Allahu that we can get up from sajda. And the position that we are sat in, we can't wait for the Imam to move from that position so that now we can sit correctly, so we can sit at ease. Person is ma'zur is different. But this is because of not having that habit of performing our salah. The whole year there is no salah, and then all of a sudden, we're doing so much in the month of Ramadan, it's going to have an effect on our bodies. People complain, we're so tired, we're going to be so tired because we're not in the habit of doing so much ibadat of Allah. And now all of a sudden we're increasing the amount of ibadat, then the person is going to feel it. Just with those who don't know physical activities, and now because of the Olympics, they all now want to go out and all become athletes. It's not going to last for long. The reason it's not going to last for long is because they haven't got the practice of it. And it's not for everybody else. Now they all want to start running around, and they all want to start becoming healthy all of a sudden. They'll find themselves become the opposite. They'll end up injuring themselves. Now they think that we want to do 100 meters sprint, and we also want to become bolts, and we want to break the records in that. But they won't even last 5 yards, never 100 meters. Why? Because they haven't been practicing. These people who are running 100 meters in whatever amount of time they've been practicing the entire year and entire lives, so they're able to, they're flexible, they're fast enough to do so. We as well, if we have the practice of performing salah throughout the year, that in the month of Ramadan, at all times we've got the practice. So the recitation of the Quran, there is no practice, so in the month of Ramadan we find it difficult. Salah, there is no salah, so in the month of Ramadan we find it difficult. Similarly, zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all other ibadat, sadaqah as well. We don't give sadaqah throughout the year. We don't give lillah throughout the year. So when the month of Ramadan comes, it becomes so taxing and difficult for us to give that amount. Now it becomes such a huge amount to give. Whereas if we had been giving throughout the year, then giving at that time would become easy as well. And this is the appeal that we've been having here of that 500 pounds from last year Ramadan, the whole point of that for those who understood it was that there is an entire year to put that money aside, to gather it, or to make appeal within people, so that when the time of Ramadan comes, you're not taking out 500 pounds from your pocket to give. Because then to give 500 pounds becomes difficult. And some have not understood that. Because of that, now they're mentioning that it's difficult to give the 500 if they can spread that out again. Whereas if from the beginning they had understood the purpose of it, that if you had kept them putting money aside, then that 500 would be ready already, and it would have been very easy. Whereas just this morning, Fajr time, one of the parents of the two girls who study here in the maktab, he came and handed over 400 pounds. And these 400 pounds was from behalf of his daughters. Well, about 7 years, 10, maybe 8 years old, and the other one is about 6 years old. And they had been putting aside 5 pounds every week. 5 pounds every week they had been putting aside. And obviously their parents helped them along the line as well. Putting money, we helped them from their money or from parents' money. But they had been putting that 5 pounds aside every week. And this morning he said that there's 400 pounds, and he came and gave that in Fajr time. So easy they made it for themselves. And he himself mentioned, what do we say? A drop becomes an ocean. So how easy it became. But that is when there is that regular habit of putting that 5 pound aside, 5 pound aside. At the end of the year, Ramadan comes and it's already accumulated to an amount that is easy for us to give. But we don't have that habit. Same with zakat. For those people who find taking out zakat, lump sum, difficult at the time of zakat, easy thing is when you know that approximately each year your zakat comes out to this certain amount figure. A person knows more or less how much it is, and you know how much you made or you haven't made. Then when that is the case, then from the beginning of the year, from the end of Ramadan, if you're giving Ramadan, already just start putting some aside with the intention that this is for zakat. If you're going to be putting that aside throughout the year, then when your nisab comes to an end, you just take it from there, give it from there. Rather than having to take out from what you've got, that feels more burdensome on an individual. A person will find that difficult. He'll find it difficult to separate with that wealth. Whereas if he's been doing this throughout the year, then when the time comes, it will become easy for that individual. These are ways of doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a regular basis. And it is this regular ibadat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciates. And it is this that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, and what Allah ta'ala wants from us. And this is what makes ibadat easy as well. On one occasion, Sayyidina Aisha, Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered the home. When he entered the home, there was another lady who was there with Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. After she left, Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam inquired who she is. Sayyidina Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha mentioned that this is so-and-so woman, who people boast and people talk a lot about her salah. The people envy her salah. People talk a lot that she is that woman who reads so many rakats of salah. Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Ma. He said, forget about her, leave her. Oh, Aisha, forget about her. You do what you have capability of doing. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as human beings, tumlilu, you will tire. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُلَمِّلُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala la yumallil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never tires, but humans, you will tire. You will tire. Which means that if you do not have the habit of constantly doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if all of a sudden you're going to start doing the ibadat of Allah in great amount, you're not going to be able to maintain that level. And what will happen is that a person will then totally flop and drop. And this is what I'm mentioning, that if from the beginning of Ramadan, or this last 10 nights, in these nights, if on the first night itself we're now going to totally raise the bar, totally raise the amount of ibadah that we do, which we never had the practice of doing, what will happen is we will then become tired. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah doesn't tire, but we will tire. Then what will happen is we start with the Quran, but instead what's happening is we'll be dozing off with the Quran. And we're finding it so difficult to read the Quran. We're making dua, but in dua we're dozing off again. And we're now finding it so difficult to stay up. And because of that, what happens is that we find it a burden. We start finding it a burden to do the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is because of our lack of connection and love with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that His ibadah becomes so difficult. Because we won't find the same when it comes to other pursuits, other things. No matter how tired we are, put a movie on, a person will be able to watch that movie. And if it's an all-nighter, you have all-nighters as well. That is to get a couple of movies. And then you watch one movie after the other movie and the other movie. So you're watching movies after movies after movies. When he comes to that, you will find a person doesn't feel tired, they're not dozing off there. They find, and they'll be able to watch hours after hours after hours just watching a movie. Why? Because we find that enjoyable, we find that interesting, so we're able to do it. And the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't find that enjoyable, we do not find it interesting, because of which we become bored of that very soon. We just do a little and now we start becoming bored. Whereas Hakim Umar Thamir Rahmatullah mentions that the more we continue with that, we regularly do the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that which was burdensome and that which was difficult will then eventually become enjoyable for us. But it will become enjoyable when there is continuity with it. When it becomes a continuous practice of ours, then doing that ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will become a habit of ours. And then it will become enjoyable for us as well. And until then it won't. So to do such ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where one night we're doing extreme amounts. And then what happens is we find it difficult to maintain that level. So on the one odd night we've done so much. And then the next night we say, oh, it's not a big night, so nothing. What happens then? Nothing. Then we regard that it's not an odd night, so this night is to rest. Chutti. So it is off. We got a break tonight. So that one night then there's no ibadat whatsoever. No ibadat. Besides what we are doing, the Taraweeh and that. Besides that, then there's nothing else at all. And then when the 23rd night comes again, and now we are reminded, look, this is again an odd night. We need to do the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the person wishes that if only this was also an even night. And then what happens is, because he did so much on the first night and he found that so difficult, he's now frightened to do the ibadat. Do I have to spend this night again the way I spent that night? So he finds this night difficult. And now he's making excuses, looking for excuses to delay starting his ibadat. He's looking for excuses to delay starting his ibadat. Our case should be that we should be hastening that when can I get done with whatever I need to get done so I can start doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As I mentioned previously that the awliya, they found great enjoyment in the nights. They couldn't wait for when night falls. We can't wait for the day, they couldn't wait for the evening. But I have the opportunity to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha, one night, she starts the salah of tahajjud. On doing the salam of the 2 rakats, she finds that it is time for subh sadiq. She finds it's time for subh sadiq and she complains to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, you made the night too short. Allah, you made the night too short. Then they complain that we need more of the night, so the more we can spend in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas we now find that a daunting task. And we want delay tactics, anything to delay, so that, oh, it's become late now, so there's only time to read 2 rakats or something, then we have to sit and do the sehri, this is the masjid. Whereas ours would be, after Tarawih, maybe a person wants to freshen up. Freshen up as quick as possible, so that then you can get back to doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And abstain from all those things, those company, those sittings, that are now going to deprive you of that ibadat of Allah. That's going to delay you in the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abstain from those things. So this is then what happens. That the dastakhan gets late, and then the conversations start. And those conversations go on and on and on. And by doing that, what we don't realize is that we're missing out on the night. We're missing out on that night. And as it is, the nights are literally very short. The nights are literally very short. When that is the case, right, we won't get these nights again, food we're going to get all our lives. Khana pina to milega. Doston ke saath baatcheet karna, gappa marna, you're going to get these things later on as well. Gapshap ka mauka milta rahega. This, you won't get these opportunities. You won't get these opportunities. So ensure that we hasten, get done with whatever we need to do and get back to the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As I was mentioning to you, that individual who's going to do ibadah in such a way will find the 23rd very difficult to do. And then when the 24th night again he feels free that there's nothing to do. 25 again a tall order. 27 again a tall order. 29 again a tall order. Each night is now going to become so difficult for him. So in essence, all he's done some ibadat on the 21st. And after that, he's not been able to do anything at all. Or then you get that individual who does nothing at all and only does everything on the 27th night. And by doing it only on the 27th night, he may miss out on the night of Qadr if the night of Qadr are on the other nights. If it was on the 21st, if it was on the 23rd, 25th or 29th, he's missed out on that because he's only done everything on the 27th alone. So in this way, this up down, there's still that possibility that we may miss out on the night of Qadr. The easiest way and the best and efficient way, today we all talk about efficiency. Everything is eco-friendly and everything is efficient in that, simplified in that. The easiest way and the best way is to do the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the 10 nights. Throughout the 10 nights. And that too at a level that is comfortable for us to do. Whoever does that, throughout the 10 nights, then you will find that he is automatically going to get the night of Qadr. He's going to find it easy as well because he's not going to think one night this, one night that. And maybe sometimes in that, a person may even forget what night it is. And because he forgets, he might even actually miss one of the odd nights. And in our conditions, there's going to be a lot more confusion. With the commencing of the month of Ramadan separately, then obviously somebody's odd night is going to be somebody's even night. So in that there's going to be more and more confusion. See, in that person's odd night, we might get confused, is it our odd night or even night? So there is that confusion as it is in keeping up with what day it is, night it is. Easiest thing is that throughout the 10 nights, keep a moderate level of ibadat throughout and you're guaranteed to get the night of Qadr. The example of this is that there was a prince, and this prince had a ruby. He had a precious stone. And he was out somewhere. And when he was out, he was a place where there was other normal stones on the floor, on the ground. And he dropped this precious stone of his. When the stone dropped, he said to his men that, just get a bag or container and collect and gather all the stones that are there and just put that together. They asked and questioned him that why should we collect all the stones for? Why not just sift through it and find that stone itself? To which he mentioned that if we now going to start moving the stones and searching for it within the stones, the chance is we'll probably miss it somewhere. It might be hidden somewhere and we'll miss it. And if it is fallen here, now if we gather all the stones, then in all the stones, that stone is definitely included. Now just take all the stones, that one stone is definitely included in that. So in the same way, if we just gather all the nights, then that one night is definitely included in that. We've got all the nights, we've definitely got that night of Qadr. So how easy it becomes. And if we keep it as a level that we can maintain, it becomes a habit of ours. So irrelevant of what night it is, it will become a habit of ours, and wherever there is a habit of doing good deeds, to maintain that becomes easy. And then with great ease, we will be able to find the night of Qadr. And this is all to do with, I mentioned this, getting our time fixed with regards to things. Very, very important. And even if this means that we fix time. We fix time for iftari. We fix time for whatever we want to do after Taraweeh. We fix time for iftari, how much time you will spend to eat. Then you'll find you'll be able to make it in time for Isha Jama'ah. Otherwise, you'll be sat there one day quick, you get up quickly, one day you'll be sat there just talking away. And you'll be running and you'll be late for Salah. It is the same with regards to Sehri as well. There's those people who are rushing and jumping for Sehri. Quickly get something done for Sehri. Why? Because there's no system in no pattern whatsoever. If there's Nizamul Awqat, then there'll be system. That by this time you finish Taraweeh, you get home by this time, this amount of time is allocated for whatever you want to do. And then Ibadat from this time to this time is allocated. And then from this time is in preparation for Sehri and in eating the Sehri. After Sehri, this amount of time of doing wuzu again and coming back to the masjid. If this pattern is set for us, then you will find it will become very easy for us to maintain that. And if that isn't set, then again it will be case of many times we miss Fajr Salah. Why? Because we were not set properly. In the same, we might even miss Sehri as well, because we were not set properly. So very, very important, especially when I mentioned we've already into these 10 nights. And we've already passed a couple of odd nights as well. when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these days, these nights specifically, it's very, very important for us to acquire the most from it. And with regards to everything else, where we set out specific patterns and schedules, organization, we talk about preparation and organization. And the more organized a person is, the more they benefit from things. In the same way, with regards to the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more organized we need to be. And this is the system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He created the heavens and the earth, what did He do? Fi sittati ayyamin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it in 6 days. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in 6 days. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't need to. He would have just said, could just intended, and everything would have been made. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose specifically. Saturday was for this, next day was for this, further day was this. And accordingly on each day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created different aspects of the earth. And then on Friday He created Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, the best of all these creations. Why did Allah do that? He did this in order to show us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is carrying out an important task here of creating mankind. And for mankind there needs to be an earth. Now that task, which for Allah is simple, but Allah Ta'ala wants to show us and give us a lesson that for such matters you need to plan things out and you do things moderately. You did moderately. And in this way, different aspects of the earth was created different days to show us organizing. Allah Ta'ala Himself is giving us organizational skills. And the fact that things should be planned out. Al-anatu min Allah wal-ujlatu min ash-shaytan. Nabi Kareem has mentioned, ujlat, haste in matters. Unplanned things, this is from shaitan. And where there is planning behind it, there is ease behind it, this is from Allah. And unplanned hastening in matters, this is from shaitan. And this is how we are as well doing now ibadat. Unplanned. Got some Josh vibes in me. They tell to do wuzu and just start doing excessive amount of ibadat. And then we flat after that, we can't do again. أحب الأعمال إلى الله أدومها وإن قل. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions that the most beloved amal to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that which is little less, but it is continuous. That is more beloved to Allah. Then excessive amount of ibadat, but wherein there is no continuity. So very, very important, dear friends, that in order to make the most of these nights, that we have continuity, level of ibadat that we can maintain, and do the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all 10 nights. That will be the best way we can acquire the night of Qadr. And I was intending to actually even mention the dua of the night of Qadr, with a brief explanation which I mentioned in ladies' talk today. And those men who were there, at the end, one of the uncles who was there, elderly brother, had mentioned that the explanation of the dua was very beneficial. He found it very beneficial of the manner in which it was explained, the dua of the night of Qadr. Because if we know the explanation of these duas and then we read these duas, we'll get a lot more enjoyment in it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, we shall do that in tomorrow's majlis. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants all the understanding and tawfiq. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.